Okay, I'm back. I'm having some technical difficulties. I apologize. So we're going to go back to talking about calligraphy. So what we have here are some calligraphy pens, and the calligraphy pens are flat. And the reason why it's important to know that, because when you're writing with a calligraphy pen, what you're going to end up with are areas of writing that are going to be thicker than others. And if you're holding your calligraphy pen right, this is a small one, if you're holding your calligraphy pen right, when you come down on your downstrokes, you're going to get a fat line. But on your upstrokes, you're going to get a thin line. So if we pull down and then go up, and pull down and then go up, and then pull down, and we end up with a delineation of the size and the width of what a calligraphy pen will do. This one is not quite as noticeable because it's very thin, but we can't use calligraphy pens really on cookies. So what we do is what's called faux calligraphy, to try to fake those thick and thin lines. Let's see if I can get this one to show it better. So down is thick, up is thin, down is thick, up is thin, down, up, down, up. And as you can see, when you're using a calligraphy pen, it's going to be thick and thin, depending on which part of the stroke that you're on. So there is a sneaky way that we can do this called faux calligraphy. And the way that works is by actually drawing it the way that you want it to. And I know that there will be people who will say, well, my handwriting is terrible. I don't know how to do this with my handwriting because it won't look good. And, you know, there are some people who don't have the greatest handwriting, which is why we have projectors and tracing, and those are things I'm also going to show you. But you would be surprised at how you can dress up your handwriting with using faux calligraphy. And that's what I'm going to show you right now. So if I were going to write out, let's say, for instance, happy birthday, and I'm just going to write it out in cursive, and if my Sharpie will work. My Sharpie is not working. If I'm going to write it, just write out happy birthday. So let's just go with happy. This is just regular cursive handwriting. But what I want to do is I want to pretend that this is calligraphy, and that I've done this with a calligraphy pen. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to thicken up every downstroke. So if I thicken up every downstroke, when I wrote this H, I went up and then I went down. So if you thicken up this downstroke here, and then I went up and then I went down. So the downstroke on this H, I'm going to thicken up. Then on my A, I started here and I went up and then I went down. I'm going to thicken that up. And then over here I went back up and then I went down again. So I'm going to thicken this up. Then I went up and then I went down. So I'm going to thicken up the line of this P, up, down here, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And as a very sloppy version, you can see that that has taken that happy and has turned it into quite something different than it was before as just a regular word happy. So as I was sitting at a conference call today at work, it was really boring. I went ahead and started doodling, and I made a few to show you guys. So for instance, this is my just straight up bored sitting at work handwriting. So I just wrote out happy birthday. Well, then I went in and added little boxes on the downstrokes, on all of it, on the whole thing. And then I colored in the boxes on the downstrokes. And it looks, if you look between this messy old third grade handwriting to this, it looks a lot different. And all I did was add some boxes on the downstrokes and color them in. And it looks a lot more like calligraphy. Here's another one that I did that's Merry Christmas. Just added some boxes on the downstrokes and then colored in the boxes. And it looks so much more fancy. Again, I did A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, plain with the boxes and with the boxes colored in. And then here is my completely beautiful piece of art that expressed the way I felt as I was sitting there on a really boring conference call where we really didn't accomplish anything at all. So it looks pretty fancy. Now, there is a place where you can get some resources where you can actually practice that. I buy books quite frequently. This is one that I have bought that I really like. You can get it on Amazon. I've got another one to show you as well. But essentially, these books have different things in them that you can practice. So it has where you can practice making F's and G's. And if you notice, it's got the little places where you can draw the boxes and make the thick lines. And they have a lot of different, here's where I've practiced some. And they're actually really nice to have and a great way to practice doing that faux calligraphy. Or if you're brave enough to try a brush pen or a calligraphy pen, you can do it that way. So I would recommend getting some lettering books and practicing some lettering. And sometimes they have some fun ones that you can go in. As you can see, I was in here just practicing like crazy one night while we were watching TV. Just practicing my faux calligraphy. And I'm not seeing questions only because my phone is facing down. So I will go in and answer questions. If you're watching this as a replay, please put replay on there so that you can I can answer them later. But the live questions I will answer as well. I can't see them because my phone is facing down. And I don't have another piece of technology to look at it. I'm sorry. Other book that I use, this one is pretty new. I haven't actually gotten through the whole thing, but this is another one that it's the same thing, Hand Lettering for Relaxation. It is on Amazon, and this one just gives you different other things that you can try. It explains to you different types of lettering, and gives you little things that you can do like this and just sort of make you feel good. So there's that. So practicing your hand lettering is a thing that's going to help you be able to do it better on cookies. And you might surprise yourself. You might actually be able to write on cookies. So moving on to with your own handwriting without using a projector or without using the tissue transfer method. But I'm going to show you those anyway. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about the icing consistency, because when you are writing on cookies, it is going to depend on what mechanism you choose when you're writing on your cookies. Particularly when we're doing script, we are going to need to use either pressure piping, which is one consistency of icing to do the whole thing, and just a different pressure as you're doing the downstrokes to make those fat versus the upstrokes where they're just a line. Or you're going to outline and box in the thick areas with a piping consistency and then turn around and flood those boxed in areas with a flood consistency. And I'm going to talk to you about the different consistencies that I use, and then I'm going to show you the tissue paper transfer method and the projector as well, and using both of those mechanisms. So this is a little bowl of icing that I have. It turned out kind of a weird teal color, but I think I like it. This is fairly thick. It wouldn't hold for flowers, but it's a little too thick for what I want it to be. So of course, when I'm working with icing, I take the thickest icing out of the bowl first, then I thin it and take the next thickest, and then I thin it, and so on and so forth. So this right here, what I'm looking for right now is getting to my piping consistency. The piping consistency is going to be what I'm going to use to make the thin lines of the writing. And so on those examples that I wrote while I was sitting at work bored today, which I have already lost, this would be this part of it. It would be these thin lines, and that's what I call the piping consistency and what I use the piping consistency for. This is too thick. I like my piping consistency. When I pull up on it, I want it to flip over immediately, but not immediately go into the rest of the icing. So this is too thick because it's standing right up. So I'm going to thin this down just a little bit. And of course, I do use a spray bottle just so that I can control not getting too much in there. I do like my piping consistency to be a little wet. I think that it's important that you have it a little bit wet, or it's not going to stick to your cookie. So if you've got some trouble with your piping, any piping, whether it's lettering or outlines or details, and they're flaking off your cookie when you're after they're dry, your icing is not wet enough when you're putting it in your bag. So I've got this a little bit wetter, and as I'm pulling up, my peak is kind of flipping over. It might be all right, but I think I'm going to make it just a tiny bit wetter. And I really don't count seconds, but I tried to count. I counted seconds earlier so that I could give that to you, because I know a lot of people are interested in the seconds and what, that's your way of doing it. And what I wrote down for myself was that piping, I usually go at about a 15-second icing. So, but as I'm pulling this up, it's falling over immediately, but it's not immediately going into itself. And I think that this is probably good for my piping consistency. So I'm going to go ahead and bag that real quick. Just get a little bit of that in here. Don't need a whole lot. It doesn't take much unless you're doing 800 cookies. If you've got orders for 800 cookies, good for you. So I've got that one, and usually I cut the tails off of these because I don't want them getting in my way when I'm using the projector. And because I'm going to have so many bags, I'm going to go ahead and write that this is piping. Put P on it so that it's I know that this is piping. Okay. So now I have this rest of this icing, piping consistency icing for me. Now what I want to get to is a slightly thinner consistency icing that for me is what I call my pressure piping consistency icing. Now, you probably have seen cookies where people, you can tell that somebody was pressure piping because there are little ridges in their letters. And I try to avoid those little ridges in my letters. I'm not always 100% successful because it is a little bit tricky getting your consistency to the point where it doesn't hold ridges, but yet the details when you're doing loops and whatnot actually stay consistent and stay firm. So it's kind of tricky. So, but that's what I'm going for. I'm going for not having those ridges when I use pressure piping. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. The notes that I wrote to myself are that I want to go for about 12 to 13 second consistency for my pressure piping. It's not a lot more water, especially for a little tiny little bowl like this. So I'm going to go ahead and see what I think about this. It's got to be a little bit closer to flood, but not flood. Because, for instance, when I'm doing an E and the icing crosses itself, I want it to not go boom and just turn into a floody little cross there. I want it to stay a nice defined loop. So I don't want to go too thin, but this looks just about right for me. It's got a little bit of firmness to it. It's not completely going into itself. It's not all just kind of relaxing, but it's soft enough to where I feel like I won't end up with those ridges. And again, that is tricky, and I sometimes look at it and go, oh, this is perfect, and then I end up with 10,000 ridges. So we'll put some of this in here. Usually this bag is the biggest bag that I make if I'm going to do both flood and pressure piping, just because this will be the whole word rather than just the outline or just the flooding the small areas. So let me get that closed up. This one I just leave. I don't put anything on it. And then now I need my flood. Now, I do want a good flood that is kind of got some oomph to it. The thinner your flood is, the more likely it is going to crater. So I don't want to make this too much more thin, but I also don't need it to where I have to poke at it for 15 minutes with my scribe in order for it to lay down and behave itself. So I'm going to add just a little bit more water and see if I can get a good flood consistency out of this. My flood consistency is usually about 10 seconds. And again, I don't use the seconds way of keeping track, so this is just kind of what I came up with earlier today when I was trying to make sure that I was able to explain that in a good way. All right, so let's get this in here. You really don't need very much because the areas that you're going to flood are little bitty tiny areas. And those are the consistencies that I use for lettering. If I'm going to do just like, let's say it's a little kid's birthday party, I'm going to move the camera. Hopefully it won't act up. When I'm like, let's say you're doing a little kid's birthday party. You know, it's kind of one of those things where I don't know whether should I do just printing, because, you know, a third or fourth or fifth grader, they don't read cursive anymore. So am I going to write their name in cursive and they're not going to know what it says? Or should I just use printing? Of course, when you do cursive and you do fat calligraphy, it's just so much more pleasing to the eye. The artistry of it is just so great, and it's beautiful, and we love it. But can the kid read it? So sometimes I'll do a little bit of both, some that are going to please the parents and some that are the kids going to actually say, hey, that's my name. But when I do that, I will use my piping consistency. But I will make sure that my piping consistency is wet enough that it stays on the cookie, that I could actually take a dry cookie and rub my hand across it and it would not separate. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to pipe a seamless line. Piping a seamless line might seem like a no-brainer, but one of the things that happens a lot when you're making letters is that you're trying to do a seamless E, for instance, and your icing breaks in the middle of the E, or you're doing line, or you're doing something, and this works for anything. Thanks, Anna. I'm seeing your comments now. I haven't been ignoring them. I'm not tech savvy. But I'll have to answer questions there because I can't talk and chew gum at the same time. But what if it breaks? What if your line breaks in the middle? And how are you going to fix that without making it all jacked up? And there is actually a secret to this, and I'm going to show you this if I can figure out what I did with my scissors. So I'm going to move the camera again, and then I'm going to show you. Can you change the camera so the words aren't backwards? Laurel, I'm sorry, I don't know how that is. I'm sorry. Let me put this back down so I can show you cutting the bag. And I'm sorry. It is taught in some of the schools. That's great. I'm in Kentucky, and my grandson sees something in cursive, and he's 12. I don't know what that says, Grandma. Maybe we need to move to Ohio. Okay, I'm going to put this back down, and we're going to keep on trucking. All right. Okay. So, of course, one of the things that's really important about cutting a tipless bag, I rarely use tips, really only when I'm doing flowers, just because I've gotten used to the tipless bags, and I'm super lazy and I don't want to wash all those tips. So the way that you cut a tipless bag is you take this little seam, and this is where we use the specific tipless bags rather than those the Wilton stick bags, because these have a tiny itty bitty little seam and it doesn't get in the way when you're trying to pipe small details. But when you cut your bag, you definitely want to put your seam on top just like this, and then you want to cut across it. Okay, let's see, can you see, cut across it like this. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this bag with a pretty small hole. If you cut it too small, you're going to end up with it curling coming out of your bag. So how do you, let's just waste an ugly cookie. So if I'm piping, when I first, if you came to my class at CookieCon, I'm trying to see if you can see what I'm doing here. If you came to my class at CookieCon in Dallas, I talked about this, but this is what I call when you barely squeeze your bag and just a tiny little bit comes out. I call that the nub. It's just the tiniest little bit of icing, but that tiny, tiny little bit of icing is sticky. And if you touch that to your cookie and touch it and then start squeezing, you have connection, and you can, oh, and I had a bubble. This is a perfect example. So I have this little section here, and I'm going to just barely squeeze and get my nub, touch it, and start squeezing again to pick up, keep going. This is how you get clean lines without that bulb on the end. And now when I'm done, I'm just going to stop squeezing, and I'm just going to barely touch down. And so I have a clean line, but look, I've got a section there that's empty, and I need for that to have icing in it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bag, and I'm just going to barely squeeze it until the nub is out. And I mean nub, I made that name up. I don't know. And I'm going to touch it to this section where I need for it to pick up. I'm going to squeeze a little bit, and then I'm going to put, it's not cooperating, it's making me look like a big liar. Let's try it again. Take the nub, stop, start back up, stop. I'm going to touch here with the nub, and then I'm going to touch here. And I touch down, but you can repair those lines with the nub. And that's how you get clean lines. So this is my piping icing, and I want it to, if I do an E, I want that E cross to stay crossed and not relax into itself. That's not really an E, it's more of a peace sign or a fish sign, but whatever. So that's important. That's not a very good example, shame on me. So what we're going to talk about beyond making seamless lines, practice that. Practice the nub, putting it down, lifting it up, making a straight line, and when you put it back down, make it a very gentle put down, and you don't end up with all those pokey ends. Yeah, I'm not doing a good job of making an example of that. But let's go on to tissue transfer method. The tissue transfer method can be done with either a non-toxic pencil or a edible marker, whichever you feel more comfortable with. Basically, what you do is you take one side of the piece of tissue paper. This is just tissue paper that you would use in a present. So take one side of it and color on it. And I'm just going to color it black. And you got to do this pretty quick because it needs to be wet or somewhat damp anyway, so it will transfer. And the point is that I'm putting ink on this side, and then I'm going to take a cookie and I'm going to flip this over, and I'm going to press this down, and then I'm going to put something on here, and I'm going to write it on here. I'm not going to do it very thick, very firm, because I don't want to tear the tissue paper. But But if I do it just like that, what it's going to do is it's going to take some transfer of that ink that I just put on the other side there, and it's going to put it on the cookie, and I put it on there too wet. I'm not doing a very good job of. And then I can go and put my icing down over it. To be honest with you, I usually use a pencil. I don't use an edible marker. So then I can then trace over it. Just like that. And if I wanted to make this thicker, I could go here and do that. And then get my flood. But I'm going to do full words for you guys. So that's with the edible marker. With the pencil, it's the same concept. You lay down some pencil. Get a better pencil. I'll put it over here. So you've got lead on it, and if you want to put it on the cookie, then you would just come in here and write it on the other side, and it will lay down that lead. And that's the tissue paper transfer method, and it's very faint. I don't know if you can see it, but it's on there. And then you can pipe over the top of it, and that's a way to get it onto the cookie if you don't want to do it with your own handwriting. Or there's a certain font that's just, you know, really particularly significantly hard, and there's just no way that a human being could possibly do that. But that helps. So there's that. The next way is, of course, through if you have a projector. I see people using the projectors that are the ones that are the, what do they call them, the smart sketchers. I don't have a smart sketcher, but it seems like people have good luck with those. So get this where you can see it. I have an AXAA projector. I've had it forever, and by saying this, I'm probably jinxing myself and it's going to die, but it's been working really well for me for about 4 years. So this is another way. Just do it like this. The way this font is called Italian Breakfast. I like it. I use it a lot. This one, if I do as pressure piping, and that's going to be this particular bag. Let me cut it. So pressure piping, and I usually have a burner cookie because it kind of seems like it takes me a little bit to get in the groove of it, but pressure piping is essentially I'm going to set my bag down and I'm going to squeeze pretty good as I'm on these down strokes. And you can make them thicker. I need to cut this a little bigger. I'm trying to do it so you guys can see and stay out of the way of the... But then let off and not squeeze so hard as I come into these more single line areas. Right, so this is a thin area. I'm going to go thin, but then when I turn this corner, I'm going to start squeezing harder. And I'm going to go thin again. Thick on the downstroke. It's really just moving a little bit slower and squeezing a little harder. And then just piping a line. Now thick, now thin, now thick, now thin. This is why I like this consistency, because I feel like it's keeping its shape. Like, say, for instance, right here where the R flips around, but at the same time, the areas where I squeezed coming down aren't really lumpy. So that is pressure piping with a projector. So if I change to a different font, that's like a fatter font that would really work really well. So on the font, I just go to the main and I will choose something. Usually I'll go with handwritten because there are so many pretty ones. But you really are supposed to check to see if they're let's just make it Tina, because that's a short word. And we can make it really big. So if I were going to do this one using the pipe and flood function, what I would do, and I do this in a very odd sort of format. Like, I won't do the whole T and then do the whole I and then but it really depends on how quickly I'm going to do it and how big of a word it is. But you're essentially outlining the word so that you can create places to flood. Make sure that this is where you all can see it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start here, and you've got to get it to where you can see past your own hand. And I'm going to outline this T. And I can just stop right here in the middle of the I, but I'm going to make my box for my T. And then I'm going to make my box for my I. And a lot of times I'll go across the top and do the top. Make my box for my N, do this. And kind of outline it is what I usually will do. And then I'll come in and do the remainder of the boxes that I need for my downstrokes. And of course, you got to have your scribe around just in case you end up with a little bit that's poking up. And so now I'm going to come in with my flood with a very small hole, and I'm going to fill these areas in. And then I'm going to take my scribe and I'm going to clean up the edges. And honestly, a lot of times when I have the projector going, I have to get my head in the way because I can't really see exactly what it looks like when the light is still shining on it. And I just go in and clean it up. Make sure that the corners look nice and that the flood has gone into the little boxes and the piping that you've made, and then come back and finish up with the details. So another name that looks really good, I did some cookies that under the name Addie. That name looks really nice when you do it in calligraphy. So with my piping bag, I'm going to just start here. You start wherever you want, really, it doesn't matter. And if I wanted to just do letter by letter, you can do that. And if you're in a place where there's a fan and there's a lot of airflow and your icing crusts quickly, or if you use a lot of meringue powder in your icing and you want to just pipe and flood each individual letter so that you can clean it up, you know, before anything crusts, then that's totally fine too. No, I just got a wiggle in my hand for no reason. Just remember to put your end kind of in the middle of the letter where you're going to cover it up. So this one actually is, I thought they were really pretty after I made them for this little girl named Addie. And hopefully she could read cursive. So I'm going to start here. And one thing that you notice on D's and B's, just want to curl, so I need to clean my tip, is that they tend to go way out this way with the back end of the D. That's a little out of the ordinary in the way that we would normally write, but they do that so that there's a space between the thick part and the other part of the D, so that it follows the calligraphy. But you can still see that extra. Yeah, I have some difficulty with my icing. But that's one of the beautiful things of it, is that you can, hopefully when it does that, is that it's in a part where you're going to make it fat and fill it in with flood anyway. And honestly, a lot of times when you give a customer a cookie that's got calligraphy on it, they're not going to notice the imperfections that you are. They really don't. Unless, of course, you know, your customer is a calligraphy artist or something, then I would guess probably they would be a little bit more critical. So I'm just filling in these little boxes that I made. I'm just manipulating the icing a little bit with my scribe so that it looks seamless and it fits in with my piping lines and my flood are kind of all together to make this nice fat writing that has the thin lines on the upstrokes. So I'll finish this one really quick, and then I will look at questions and see if there are any questions that I can answer. I have Addie. She was a cute little girl. Okay, I'm going to flip the phone up and see if there are any questions. Hi, Anna. Anna's my neighbor. Learned something new today, so that's wonderful. Let's see what else. Can you use an edible marker to write your word on the cookie and then trace with the icing? Does it work? Yes, actually, I know that there are people who actually can do that very successfully. I seem to have a trouble with, and maybe it's the brand that I've got, that they want to bleed. So try it. Try it and see if it works, because it seems to me like that would be a very logical thing to do, doesn't it? If you can get it to not bleed. I thought using yellow would be very subtle, and you wouldn't be able to tell it was there, and then it bled into my icing. But I suppose if you're using yellow and then a nice teal color, then it wouldn't. So that's a very good question. Let's see. The pencil thing, the non-toxic pencil thing is very, it's controversial, and you do what makes you feel the right thing is, and that's the stance I take. Michelle asks, is there a particular brand of tipless piping bags you like to use? These right here are, I really like these. These are from Bees Baked Art, and they're little. Now, I really like these for doing this, because you just don't need very much icing. But I like Wonderfully Delicious, and I like TMP. So, they just, try what you like. They have those cheapy ones on Amazon, and those are the ones that I get the blowouts on. I don't know that I've ever had a blowout on Bees, Wonderfully Delicious, or TMP. But I like the little bitty ones. Now, I did get this one from Cookie Con. I'm not sure if it came in the loot bag. It's Summer's Sweet Shop. And there were a few of them I don't know if they were, somebody gave these away and, trades at Cookie Con. But look how long and skinny that bottom part is. I really like that, because I feel like you can put icing in it and then, get into nooks and crannies with it. I have one left. I need to figure out how to get more of these. Okay, let's see. Yeah, people talking about the somebody did a tutorial on Holiday Cookie-a-thon where they transferred a design onto a flooded cookie using candy melt scraped onto the back of tissue paper. Well, isn't that clever? I'm sorry I missed that. I could see where that would be, provided it didn't bleed. So yeah, lots of comments about the pencil. That is, it's the pencil thing. So you do what you feel is the right thing. And the replay will be posted in the event. And again, if you ask questions while you're watching the replay, please quantify your question as a replay question, so that I can go back in and follow up and answer those. And I think, can you change the? Oh yeah, the words were backwards. I'm sorry that the words were backwards. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, I'm so sorry. I'm trying to read the questions. I think that's all of them. So let's see if there are any more since I've been scrolling. Victoria loves the bags. They make them that small. They do. Actually, a lot of the places have those little small bags, and you're very welcome. I love sharing. Hi, from Australia. Lisa's from Australia. I bet she has a cool accent. And there's Deborah. Anna, you definitely can use your own handwriting. You just got to practice getting the downstrokes. It's always the downstrokes. Just remember, it's the downstrokes, always the downstrokes are the ones that are fat. And if you do that, you turn regular handwriting into something that looks like a work of art. The name of this plaque, I got it at Cookie Con. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a rounded triangle. I'm sorry, I should be giving a nice plug to the cookie cutter lady who sold it to me, because she was super sweet too, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry. And let's see what else we got. Hi, Faye. Okay, well, I guess that's it. I hope I gave you some good information here. I'm sorry I'm technologically challenged. I'm not very good at this type of thing, but I do like to teach. If you have any questions, you can message me. It's totally fine. Put questions in the comments, and I will. There's another one starting at 7:30 that's someone else. It's gonna be awesome, and I will be teaching at CookieCon, but something different. And if you want, I will give you a sneak peek. Don't tell. This is a cookie that I'll be teaching at CookieCon in an elective. So, don't tell. So anyway. Okay, did I get the icing timing correct? 14 to 15 seconds for piping, 12 to 13 for pressure, and 10 seconds for flooding. Yes, Alita, that is correct. You all take care. Everyone stay safe and keep cooking. And hopefully I'll see you somewhere, sometime, and we can have fun cooking together. Bye now.